I am live with Joe Koufman. Joe, how are you doing today?
Doing great. How are you, Jeff?
I'm good. I'm good. It's always good to see you. I've seen a lot of you over the years. We've known each other for what, a couple decades?
20 years. Actually, technically 26 years, but you know, who's counting?
26 years. How did you know that?
Because we met in 2000.
Okay. All right. That's easy. That's when I got married. When I met Joe Koufman, when I married my wife, it's
Yeah.
perfect.
I
All
think
right.
I
We are
met
here.
I think I met Emily Hilimire soon after, actually.
Probably so. Probably so. All right. We are here to talk about your exciting news next week. Why don't you tell everybody what's launching next Tuesday, I think on the January 13th?
Yep. January 13th, 2026. My book is launching, which is called The Connector's Compass. And the subtitle is Navigating Your Way to Meaningful Relationships.
And you got a copy of that you can hold up for these
I
people to see?
do.
I
Yeah,
love it.
this is the book. We're excited that it's come out. It's been a bit of a journey to get here, about a 2-year process to get from first writing to
Yeah,
final publication, but we're here.
it happens. It happens. Yeah, it's exciting. I've gotten a pre-read, obviously, so it's a great book. And we want people to buy the book next week and hopefully book you to come talk about the book. So let's get into it. But so this is interesting. I have a question I like to ask people. Um, Sometimes when I first meet them, but oftentimes when I'm doing an interview with them on a podcast or something like this. So I'm going to ask you the question, and then I'm going to ask you how it maybe fits into the theme of your book. So my question for you, Joe Koufman, is how many owls would you need to see in a day to become concerned?
Hmm. Um, I think one owl in a day is concerning because they're nocturnal and they don't like to hang out during the daytime. Now, if you're talking about a 24-hour period, then I'd say three.
Okay, well, that's a fantastic. I've not heard anyone clarify the fact that I do say day. So that's very intelligent of you. That's your Wake Forest education coming through
Okay.
loud and clear. But three is the typical number I get as well. So three
So,
owls in a
so
day.
that so that second owl, nobody bats an eye. It's the third owl that really starts concerning you.
That's right. Then you're like something's going on.
Right, right,
So
right.
good. Okay, good. Now, so my thought is that's an interesting way to begin dialogue. You talk about in your book, for instance, again, which we'll get into the topic more, but you talk about when you ask people questions, it's not like how many kids do you have? It's you ask them about their kids. I think one of my kids is actually viewing this right now, which is very interesting. But so I asked that question, and it gets people kind of I don't know, thinking differently, and we have some laughs. Does that fit into your strategy?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think having meaningful conversations that lead to real depth are always preferable over, small talk. If we talk about the weather one more time, I mean, the weather is the weather. Dress appropriately.
Very good, very good. So give the thesis for the book, the high level of why you wrote the book, what's it about?
Yeah. So I've always been a connector. I've always enjoyed connecting people together. There are 3 marriages that have resulted from me connecting the couple to each other that all resulted in at least 2 children per couple. Um, so for me, making matches and connecting people was always, special. And I get a spark of joy and dopamine every time I make a connection for 2 other people. And so part of the premise of the book is that by making connections for other people, that benefits you in the long run. So that's part of it. The other thing is this is not a networking book per se, because networking is a tool to get you to a relationship. The goal is to build new relationships and then nurture them and maintain them over time. And so in the book, we talk about some of the attributes that you can develop and the muscles that you can flex to get from, where you are today to be better at finding and nurturing new relationships. In fact, you're referenced in the book anonymously. Like I mentioned somebody in the book who is an introvert but who has worked really hard to develop the skills to be able to form new relationships and nurture those relationships over time. And I watched you throughout your career be an incredible connector and an incredible nurturer of relationships. And, it might mean that when you finish going to a big event, you need to recharge a little bit at home, but you worked really hard to flex those muscles. And so the book talks about how these are not skills that just come naturally to people, but with a little bit of work and practice, you can develop those skills.
Yeah, yeah. You also, which is I found really interesting because I hadn't actually thought of it, but you talk about the ripple effect sometimes of making those relationships. And you just said it a second ago. You said you make those relationships or connections between two people, but it often comes back at some point to benefit
Oh
you.
yeah.
So I don't know that this book would be happening if you hadn't made a connection to me. Is that right?
Yeah, in fact, the woman that wrote the foreword from the book is Rochelle Kuramoto, who I knew from college. Literally, her freshman year, my junior year of college, we met, and she was kind enough to write the foreword of the book. And the two options for a foreword would be somebody super famous. I got I didn't get very far with getting somebody super famous,
Tim
or
Duncan?
what's that?
Tim Duncan? Did
Tim
you
Duncan
try?
would be a great choice, actually. Although very, very strong introvert. Like Tim Duncan
Uh-huh.
is absolutely a pretty introverted guy. But the second choice between somebody famous is somebody that just knows you well or has known you for a long time and really can speak to who you are as a person. And
Yep.
and so I years and years ago I introduced you to Rochelle. I think it was originally in the context of 4848, the nonprofit that develops 48 websites for 48 nonprofits in 48 hours. And then later, I know you reconnected with her, and your agency at the time, Dragon Army, acquired Watchword Brand, which was Rochelle's agency. And so, you know, I think that's one of the reasons why I was able to convince Rochelle to write the forward of my book, because she's benefited from some of the connections that I've made for her over the years.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then you sort of skipped the punchline, which was while she was at Dragon Army is when I wrote my first book and couldn't find a publisher, and really got turned off by the industry overall, talking to all those New York publishing companies. And so I decided to just start my own publishing company. Well, she was part of that group that helped me launch that. And helped edit my first books and everything. I mean, and she's a fantastic writer,
Yeah.
obviously. I hope she writes a book one day. But and then my Ripples Media, my publishing company, is publishing your book. So had you not made that connection, I don't know. I mean, that could have been 10 years ago,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah. So yeah, that's true. Rochelle and I are interconnected in many different ways, and you and I are interconnected in many different ways. And I think that's kind of part of the point of the book too, is that, you know, as a young person who's in high school and college and whatever, there are two things they should be collecting over time. One is skills, and the other is relationships. And when you start building those relationships early and nurturing them over time, to your point, you're not doing it because you're expecting them to pay a dividend, but they usually do in some way, some form, somewhere in the future. And particularly if you're very generous with making connections for other people, boy, whether that directly benefits you or not, being known as a connector of people is never a bad thing.
Hmm. Hmm. 100%. Well, you mentioned young people there. I already know I'm going to buy at least three copies, probably a fourth, for an entrepreneur I mentor, but I'm going to buy two for my two kids that want to go into film and acting. Again, one of them's dialed into this right now. Because I talk to them all the time about, like, look, you can be super talented, you can be super hardworking, et cetera, et cetera. But honestly, if you don't have a good enough network to break into film or to break into acting, you got to have all these components, but they got to be good at networking. And they're both naturally very social and good at that. But I think some of the things you talk about, especially to me, the intentionality, I think that's the thing I want to impress upon them the most.
Yeah.
So I wrote down the compass is curiosity, courage, and intentionality.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a little more to it than that, but I want to take a minute to just talk about who the book's for, if I could.
Sure.
So, this book is for people that think that networking is a dirty word, and that cringe when they think of the idea of going to a networking event, right? Like this, you don't have to go to an event and feel like you're in the meat market of some kind, right? The second one is for people that are great one-on-one but feel uncomfortable in a room, and working a room. And then as you're building your career and your business and your community, those that just care about nurturing relationships over time. And I always say too, like for introverts, I mean, introverts are it's there's nothing wrong with being an introvert. In fact, I think there's some amazing introverts are some of the most amazing people on the planet. But it makes it a challenge for them to really, meet new people, and so this is written for them. And if you want to be the kind of person who helps other people win, this is a good book for
Mhm.
you too, right? Making good connections for other people pays off in the long term.
The two best, and I'll use the word networkers, but I'll explain why I think it's more than that. But the two people I know that are the best at that are you and Ricky Steele.
Mm,
And the two of you, one of the things you talk about in the book, um, I would say you have authentic relationships. When you and I catch up, I never feel like when you ask about my kids or anything that's going on that it's anything but because you're interested and because you're curious and because
yeah,
you really care, right? And Ricky's the same way. If you know him, he's similar. So I think like I really liked how you talk about the importance of like being authentic and being real about this, but at the same time, again, being intentional. Like
yeah.
if you got to do both, right?
Yeah, and so what I hope people will get from this book is I want it to be like a practical, tangible, like kind of how-to guide for what do you do? Like what do you actually do? It's not theoretical or hypothetical. This is like brass tacks, what do you need to do? And so curiosity, asking really good questions and listening for what really matters, right? Like curiosity, I'm a curious person. When I ask you how your kids are doing, I honestly do want to know the answer. And if I don't want to know the answer, I'm not even asking a question, right? Like,
Yeah.
uh, uh, you know, um, celebrating other people, being generous with recognition and encouragement. You're amazing at that. Like that's a skill that you didn't have to really work, I don't think, so hard on doing. You're great at celebrating other people, but that's important. Diplomacy. By the way, in the book, each chapter, I pulled in quotes from people that I respect that demonstrate these values. So, like diplomacy, protecting trust and handling nuance. Like,
Mhm.
I once accused you of being good at politics. I didn't accuse you. I said you were good at politics, and you were offended.
What?
And you were offended because you thought of it as
Mhm.
office politics, stab you in the back kind of politics. And what I meant by that was you're really good at figuring out who the right people are to get something done and getting them into the room. Figuring out when it was appropriate to coach somebody up or when it's appropriate to give somebody critical feedback. And those are skills that help you nurture relationships that, politics in the truest sense of the word is not a dirty word. It's interacting with people in a way that that benefits everybody involved,
Yeah.
ideally.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, yep, go ahead.
well, so that's diplomacy, vulnerability, kind of showing up as a real person and not a polished persona. There's a great story in the book about Stacy Tank, who's the CEO of Bespoke Beauty Brands now, but she was the chief transformation officer for Heineken, reported directly to the global CEO of Heineken, lived in Amsterdam. But she tells stories about vulnerability that move you, right? And they cause her to be able to be real and vulnerable with her team, which then allows her to build deeper relationships with them.
Yeah.
Um, and then the other couple things are making meaningful introductions, making connections with context and care. You're not just blanket sending out emails or whatever. You're making really conscious efforts to think about the person. And then having that growth mindset. There are a couple quotes from another Ripples author, Adam Albrecht, who, his book is What Does Your Fortune Cookie Say?
Mhm.
These are life tips, but he has one of the best growth mindsets of anybody that I know. And so, it's not about perfection, it's about getting better with practice over
Yes.
time.
Yeah.
And then how do you maintain those relationships in the long term? That's the part most people overlook. It's easy to meet somebody new, but it's hard to then build that relationship over time. And there's some great quotes from a couple people in the book about that. I mean, Abby England is another Ripples author that does an amazing job of just reach out, and Joanne Harold also another Ripples author that they reach out and stay in touch
Hmm.
for little things. I mean, hey, I just thought of you and send you a text. It doesn't have to be formal. It doesn't have to be fancy, but doing all of these things, practicing and flexing those muscles, even people that feel really uncomfortable meeting and nurturing relationships with new people, can get better at it.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that's an interesting segue because I thought about you. I was catching up with our mutual friend Raj Chowdhury, who is my business partner at Purpose Group and was
Yep.
my college roommate and everything.
Yep.
So I don't know if you remember the story, but when Raj graduated from college, we had started what became Spun Logic, and his parents gave him a round the world trip ticket to go like kind of take 6 months or whatever it was going to take and just live life and experience things. I didn't know this until just like this past week. His dad told him there's only one rule. When you leave one place and go to the next, you cannot take anybody with you. So you leave all those relationships, you go make new relationships and you forge new relationships. And it forced him to get out of his shell because I think he's also, I was a little surprised, he's also more of an introvert,
Hey, yeah.
but he's out there now and networking. But he said that that was like pivotal for him to learn how to like A, have to like say goodbye to people, but then B, like show up in a new city and know nobody.
That's great. That's a great tip, and piece of advice from his father. But the challenge, I would say, is why do you have to leave everybody behind when you go to the new?
I think he meant like literally can't bring a girlfriend with you to the next city because
Oh,
that way you have to start fresh. That's what I think he meant. Yeah,
fair enough. Fair enough.
yeah,
But I would say, you know, this is there's like a old saying that like we can only maintain, I don't know, 200 relationships, and some people that are super connectors maintain more than that. And I talk about in the book, there's a great book by Marissa King called Social Chemistry that I quote in the book, and she talks about the three different kinds of connectors. And but the reality is, you know, we will maintain the relationships that are important to us. And over time, it pays to continue to nurture those relationships because you never know when they're going to pay off. And that's not the reason why you're nurturing the relationships, because you're not when you build a new relationship and you meet somebody new, you're not doing it because you're hoping that you're gonna get a payoff.
right.
But you probably are,
Yeah.
whether you know it or not. As I'm thinking about this book and launching this book out into the world, I made a list of all the people that I've got relationships with, and they're, bucketed into groups. They're people that have worked with my company setup that are, related to that. They're people from AMA. I'm the incoming president of AMA starting in July of 2026. There are people from college. There are people from past work lives. I spent 8 years at a .com called Knowledge Storm. I spent 6 years at Spun Logic and Engage. And so these are people that I've gotten to know over the course of my career, over the course of my life. And now many of them are offering to buy the book, which is exciting for me. And I'm not trying to cash in chips. I built relationships, and I think people genuinely want to support me now at this point, now that I'm launching a book. So it's exciting.
Yeah, no doubt. You're going to have a lot of people that want to support you because you've built those authentic relationships. I was thinking back, I remember I don't know, several years back, you and I on a whiteboard at a 48 and 48. And I think we were mostly focused on your personal purpose that we were working on. And it all came back to connections. But were we also talking about the book, like suggesting that that became a book, or I can't remember?
Not yet at that point, but where we landed was we were talking about my company purpose, which, as
Hmm.
set up, our purpose is to unlock the power of human connection. And I remember our original purpose, you kept saying to me, it's too specific, it's too it's not wide enough, it's not universal enough. And you kept asking the question, well, why? I think it was to unlock the power of human connection. And you're like, but why would you unlock the power of human connection? And so like, no, the original one was something different, but
It's probably more geared toward like, marketing and sales relations. It was probably like very
yeah, it was like
specific to that.
matchmaking or
Yeah.
something.
Right.
And, I think it was something like we're better together, or something like that. But um, at the end of the day, unlocking the power of human connections has it's not just my company's purpose, it's my personal purpose. And this book is an extension of that, because the power of human connection is something that can't be duplicated by AI. At the end of the day, we crave human connection with each other, in different forms and different fashions. And those that are good at forming and nurturing relationships will not only win in the end and benefit from those relationships, but the feeling that you get of being connected and part of a community and part of a group of people, whether it's your church community or your work community or your friend group or whatever that community is. We crave community as humans. Even introverts crave community, right? Their community might be smaller and more intimate. But at the end of the day, I'm excited about the book because it is an extension of me. It's an extension of my company. It's an extension of my personal brand for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it's terrific. I know it took a couple years to get it done. Sometimes books do. It's ready. I'm excited for people to buy it next week. Any final things you want to share about the book before we hang up here?
Connectorscompassbook.com is an easy place to go to find the book. That goes over to the Ripples Media site where somebody could purchase the book. I have these launch teams. So if anybody is interested in supporting by like setting up a book club or speaking opportunity or a podcast or anything like that, let me know. But connectorscompassbook.com is where you can actually purchase the book.
Awesome. All right, Joe. Well, next week's going to be exciting. We're going to be rooting for you. As I said, I'll probably get a handful, pass them around. It's also, by the way, I should point out, it's not a massive book,
No.
which I appreciate. Like I'm interested in books, 100 pages, 150 pages these days,
Yeah.
because you can actually read them.
We're right at about 150 pages and, big enough print that those of us who are over 40 or over 50 can read it without maybe reading glasses, hopefully.
Nice. All right, Joe. It was great to see you. Thanks again and congrats. This is exciting news.
Thank you.
All right. See ya.
Good to see you.